What's the most illegal thing you've ever done without getting caught? Transporting a handgun through Canada by car. This is over 20 years ago. But it was still very illegal. Oh. You mean to Alaska? I was going to say. I have my RPAL and I transport handguns via car in Canada all the time. Yep. Montana to Alaska. Buying alcohol for underage people while also being underage myself. A good way to make profit in high school though. A year after I graduated high school I had a good fake and still lived in my hometown. I had a kid I still trusted in high school essentially take weekly orders and collect cash. I would buy the booze and sell at roughly a 20% upcharge and the middleman would keep a little of cash for himself while also making himself more popular at school for providing booze. Decent side money. Transported stolen gums across state lines to deliver to a buyer and pawn the rest. That was the worst I've ever felt. And easily the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done. Sitting on 2 bottles of Captain Morgan as I was pulled over for speeding. I was 19 years old. Alone. Driving my tiny Toyota pickup about 40 miles to a party. With 2 almost full bottles of open booze in the passenger seat. Got pulled over. Had nowhere to put them. So I sat on them. Had warrants out for my arrest in a certain county in Arkansas. I was riding with a friend. Got pulled over. Shoved my wallet into a crack in the door panel. Told the officer I didn't have my ID on me. Gave the name of my best friend from high school and his birthday. Which I just barely remembered. Lastly. Don't think this is actually illegal but it was my finest moment. I was 18 and looking for a job. Got offered a gig smuggling a pallet of Hostess cupcakes and Twinkies into a fat camp. Job was given to me by the sister of one of the kids there. Their dad owned a little franchise Hostess store. I've probably pirated thousands of dollars worth of content. Wow. With songs at 99 cents each I've stolen over $1,000 in music alone. If I look at all my streamed content. Ran from the cops twice. Successfully each time. I'm 2-0 with the 5-0. The trick is if you hide behind the mountain. The wanted level will eventually drop the stars before they reach you. Did a multi-state road trip with a bong and joints being passed around the car whole time. Looking back on it I feel like a ducking idiot. With pot becoming legal in more states they're going to have to find a way to regulate how much you can have in your system to legally drive. Once I looked at the speedometer and saw I was going 20 over the speed limit. So I slowed down and checked the rear view. No cops. Went to the Disney website without my parents' permission. I don't think this is funny. I need to think about what you did. I walked into the women's changing room after swimming accidentally. Luckily there was no one showering. A bunch of showers when you walk in. Walked out immediately. No one saw. Well, I was a drug dealer for 20 years. How did you avoid getting caught for 20 years? Like you Connecticut said. Be careful who your customers are. I also changed my phone and where I lived a lot. I didn't have customers come to my house. I wanted as few people as possible to know where I lived. It also helps to have a good friend you can pay to sit on your stash for a few days. When I started selling lots and making a lot of money I had a separate flat that I only used to store my stash. Was set to have a party at a friend's house one night. Arrived to see a cop car outside his house. Didn't have anything illegal with me so nonchalantly walked in the back door. Cop had apparently came to tell his parents that there had been reports of underage drinking in the area and that they should keep track of the neighbors as well as their own kid. People started showing up after. And I was about to go out and buy drinks around the corner because I was the only one with a fake. Went out to see a police car in the parking lot of the place. With the same officer who was at my friend's house inside. Luckily. He never saw me at my friend's house. Or had any idea I was underage. I walked in. Took a case of beer to the counter. Gave my ID. And paid. Even said goodnight to the officer as I walked out. He had no idea. TLDR. Bought alcohol as a minor within 10 feet of an on-duty cop. transporting live ammunition though. Airport security post 9/11. Not sure how it happened. But mid-flight I realized I had a pocket full of 9mm and a few 22 LRs from shooting earlier that day. Total accident. Nice going. It's Use someone else's Netflix account. Back in 2010. While I was in my college library computer lab, I overheard a girl telling her Netflix password and email to another girl. I memorized it and used it for 6 years. As a senior in high school, we broke into a house that was used as a photo studio. Old as hell. Filled with props and like old computer equipment from the 90s. Had been empty for a long time. It was set to be demoed anyway in the next few months. So I took a Windows 95 disk. And this hatchet thing that probably went to an Indian costume. My friend took a dump in this toilet cause he's an ass. And then sprayed a fire extinguisher all over this bathroom. Spent a lot of time looking at old photos mostly from the late 80s to the 90s. We bailed after these construction guys came in to inspect the place. We went back to my friend's place. Installed Windows 95 on these Pentium 3 machines we had cobbled together from thrift store parts and played Diablo 2 over a LAN. Good way to play hockey with 5 other people. Edit for low up details. When the people came into the house it was actually kinda scary. The turd was on the 2nd floor. With the chem mess from the extinguisher. We were in the basement. And heard them talking and walking on the 1st floor. We went out the back door after they went out the front. With the backup plan being going through a window well in the basement if they went anywhere near the stairs. Since it was old, you could hear everything. That basement was badass. Shelves filed with books and commercial software. A pile of computer towers. Some costume props. That kinda thing. I remember there was probably one of the first USB expansion cards in good old PCI format. Just looked it up in Street View. Looks like the lot is still empty. You can barely make out the place in Street View from 2008. Technically I kidnapped a toddler from a playground. I was a teenager and had just gotten my driver's license. But wasn't allowed to have friends over when my parents weren't home, so we'd just drive to local playground and hang out there. We preferred the rusty old metal playgrounds of our childhoods because usually there were no children to contend with. But this time there was one. And he was all by himself. We were going to let him be. But he got his toy car stuck in something and enlisted us to help him out. Once the car had been rescued, he asked us to buy him a Slurpee. We said no. That maybe he should go home and ask one of his parents. Instead of going home, he had a fit and pissed his pants. It was at least 100 degrees that day. So after about 30 minutes with a wet crying toddler and no responsible party in sight, we decided to give in and take him to the gas station. It was essentially within sight of the playground. So we sat him on a beach towel, strapped him into the backseat of my car, and drove to the gas station. While I was waiting in line to pay our 3 Slurpees, I realized that technically I just kidnapped a 3-year-old from a public playground. So I finished the transaction as fast as possible and then hurried back to the park. Still no adults were present. But the park was beside the community center. Fearing the wrath of an angry, but irresponsible, guardian, we parked outside the community center building and I walked inside with him. A group of senior citizens was taking a square dancing class. So I instructed him to go up and knock on the door to the classroom and say, "I'm lost. Will you help me?" I really hope he found his parents. If not, he probably got an adopted grandma. Yes, I know this was irresponsible. But I was a teenager and a very naive one at that. I was just trying to prevent the kid from getting heat stroke. But yeah. Technically I kidnapped him and never got caught. I forgot I had a bunch of drugas in my bag when I was crossing the border from Thailand into Cambodia. If you know anything about the drug laws in Thailand, you know that they aren't big on giving out a slap on the wrist for any kind of offense. Stole a bottle of vodka off the shelf of a grocery store when I was 2 years too young to buy it. Also that other thing that I don't even think I can mention on Reddit. My friend and I allegedly stole a duck ton of cough meds from a Walmart. I found a set of keys someone had dropped when I was walking past a warehouse one night. Later that night I went back and they opened a back door. I was in and had the entire run of the place. It was some grocery store distribution warehouse. After ducking around I made copies of HTE keys and then dropped them off in the mail slot. They never changed the locks and I was able to get back in any time I wanted. Since I was a homeless teenager at the time I would sneak in late at night. I found a place to sleep. I'd eat my fill of whatever I found and then would clean up the mess and be out before these guys showed up early in the morning. I lived there until I got a job that enabled me to have a place of my own. Even then I'd often sneak in. Make sure I could get food for a meal. Toilet paper. And then leave. This was 30 years ago and I still have the key. One time my maid Callum and I broke into this abandoned building and we wrote Ming on the wall in red spray paint, the kind that doesn't wash off. And then later we found out it was gonna be demolished the next day anyway, so we were well miffed about our graffiti being removed, so we came by the next day and there was some concrete being poured in front of the building, so we wrote the words Ming and plunged there with our fingers and it's still there if you look closely. Mate, you should have been there, it was ducking mental. I used to be a drug dealer who sold everything under the sun. Now I am totally against that life, not the drugs. The lifestyle. I committed genocide once. Took a whole Kleenex but I think I got rid of all the evidence. Some friends and I spent the night before the last day of senior year driving around stealing garden gnomes for our senior prank. Which would involve putting all of the gnomes on the front lawn of the school. Which we thought would be hilarious for some reason. We just drove house to house and jumped out to grab whatever we could find and threw it in the back of my friend's car. We finally get enough to go to the school and get to work. And realize there's no ducking way we could actually get away with this. It would take forever and there were definitely cameras set up. So we drove down a gravel road and threw all the gnomes into a construction site while terrified and yelling at each other to shut up. We drove by a cop on the way out and I still have no idea why we didn't get stopped driving around a construction site like that. We never spoke of it again. So yeah, I'm not great at pranks. Smoking weed in Indiana. With how certain law enforcement handle it around here. Especially in the small town I live near. You'd think the bud that was being lit up in my bowl would be the remains of their ancestors. The most illegal thing. I don't talk about on Reddit. In truth. Only 2 other people know about that one. And I regret it being that many. Second most has to be the time I fished credit card info from idiots on B. Created a fake Amazon account. And sent hundreds of dollars in dildos to a neighbor I didn't like. Became a skilled shoplifter when I was in junior high. Got so good at it. I started taking orders from other kids. Candy. Gum. Books. Cologne. Video games. And selling them stuff at a discount. Turned my locker into a convenience store. Turned quite the tidy profit. Robbed a drug dealer's apartment while he was out. Only took bongs and pipes. What's he gonna do? Call the cops? They stole my paraphernalia. Officers. Smoked pot on the roof of the police station downtown. Also used to steal empty kegs from behind restaurants and return them for the deposit. I'm not proud but it was so easy. I worked at a auto parts store with no cameras years ago. During closing hours there were only 2 employees. One counting the register, the other taking out the trash. So while I took out the trash I also stole anything I needed. Rotors. Pads. Air fresheners. Cold air intake. Police scanner etc. Easily 3,000 worth of items. I did this for 2 years, then I quit and got into my career field. I do not condone stealing. I would not do it again. I was young and broke as shit. Bought an i5. Replaced my Pentium. Returned the Pentium in the i5's box and got my money back. Free upgrade. But not really worth it because it was 2 years ago and I'm still paranoid I'll get caught, eventually.